is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back here with some Resident Evil 4 Remake gameplay for you. And today I'm going to be talking about something that became a big talking point after the previous Capcom Spotlight, where you had some more information on Resident Evil Requiem. Obviously the biggest talk of the town was the whole Leon situation. Is he or won't he be in Requiem? He might take on that. Obviously I think he will be. I think it's pretty obvious. But it's not just the whole Leon situation that was a big talking point. Another one was the whole reveal that the director basically said that he was originally going to be the protagonist of Resident Evil 9, but that poor Leon is a bad match for horror, and it's hard to put a character like him in a horror situation because he doesn't get fragile or scared or frightened over anything anymore, or any little thing. They gave the example of a bucket falling over, which I think is kind of laughable and comical, but also maybe trying to excuse the bigger problem here. As I'm going to go over my reasons why I think the whole notion of Leon being bad at horror is honestly kind of alarming for not just Resident Evil Requiem, but Resident Evil games going forward, as well as just the fact that I feel like it's just trying to hide and excuse Capcom's laziness altogether with a lot of its OG Resident Evil cast. So sit back and relax as I go over these reasons why I do not agree with Leon is bad at horror. So one of the things you hear about the OG characters, but we're just going to focus on Leon, is that they have been through everything. They've seen everything. They're hardened by everything. They've experienced and fought everything. Nothing frightens and scares them. Therefore, they can't be in a survival horror type game. And it sounds good on paper when you say that. Yeah, you know, Leon, he's been through Raccoon City, then he survived the events of Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 6. Obviously, if you go by all his CGI movie adventures, as well as the show, he's been and done through a lot. So what could he possibly be scared of at this point that wouldn't seem forced? Well, let's get some real-life situations and examples here, okay? Imagine you're a soldier, and you're fighting for your country, and you're sent to, hundreds and hundreds of battles. Do you think that same soldier has any fear of going out to battle every day? Yeah, you bet your ass he does, because he doesn't know if this might be the last time he goes out. It's kind of like that fear of an athlete going out to, a sporting game, and they have the fear of, what if I get seriously hurt? It hasn't happened ever, but you never know, and sometimes injuries just happen out of nowhere. Sometimes you see what leads up to them. But my point being is, Leon would absolutely have fear in him no matter how many times he experiences stuff for various reasons. But the thing is that really gets me is people think, oh, well, he's not going to be showing fear, he's not going to get scared. Guys, just because someone's not showing fear visibly doesn't mean they don't have it eternally. In fact, Leon would be absolutely stupid to have no fear. I mean, think about it. Alright? Because he's experienced so many things and he's seen so many people he knows and loves die and perish on the line of duty, wouldn't that mean that he values life probably more, not just for his own life, but everyone else's? So we saw this in the remake where he was very, grief-struck about all the people that lost they couldn't save in Resident Evil 2 remake. So seeing anyone in that situation, that would be an element of fear right there. Doesn't want to let people down, doesn't want them to die. Obviously trying to preserve his own life. I mean, who wouldn't? You ever notice that the people that have fear kind of live longer because they value life so much? The people who don't, who are just reckless or maybe plain stupid, they don't live as long. So yeah, Leon would have absolute fear. Just because he's not shaking and showing it visibly, like it's like one of those, shown in anime moments where the character has to scream out what they say for you to figure out what they feel moment, doesn't mean that they don't have that. And I think that's a big problem there, and it shows kind of just people's lack of understanding things, where it has to be spoken out for you to understand what's going on. And that's just kind of lazy in a way. You don't have to say everything or visibly show something to showcase, hey, this is how someone feels, this is how they go about it. A lot of people you can't tell visibly or what they're saying, what they're thinking or doing and stuff. But, there's certain signs that are very subtle that may be hard to tell for an average person. But nonetheless, saying that, oh, Leon is just because he's hardened by everything, I don't think it's because he's hardened by anything that he can't have fear. He should damn well have fear, because the fact that he survived so many things, he has that experience. It's why he has that fear, because he knows how things can turn on a dime, how things could magically end up, and how easily he could have been dead just as much as he's alive. Just because he does roundhouse kicks and ridiculous stunts doesn't make him absolved of fear. And not to mention, if you do have someone that is that good at it, what else could you do to allocate this? Since everyone keeps thinking about it physically, from a physical standpoint, raise the stakes, make the enemies tougher, more difficult, more dangerous. Put him in an uncomfortable situation. Because no one is absolved from being in their comfort zone. When you take them out their comfort zone, hey, that changes a lot of things. So the whole allegation that, he can't be in a fearful situation is just plain lazy. And it shows Capcom's laziness, especially when they say, well, you can only be scared if the player that you're playing as is visibly frightened and stuff, or don't have experience. But see, that's where I kind of get to my hot take. And maybe it's not such a hot take, but I get sick and tired of hearing this, personally. I can only be scared if the person I'm playing with is visibly scared. Like, you can definitely see it, where they're huffing, breathing, ventilating real hard, or they're sweating, or they're screaming and yelling. Bullshit. Bullshit. And how do I notice? Well, let's just think about that for a second. If I can only get scared because the person I'm playing with on the screen is scared, right, because they don't have the experience, they're just experienced for the first time, then how would I get scared? Because I have more experience than that person, obviously. I'm someone that's played more games than any of the Resident Evil protagonists, because I've played other survival horror games and stuff. I have more experience than all the Resident Evil characters combined together because of all the survival horror games I've played and replayed. So by that letter of the token of the law, how could I ever get scared? Because I have the ultimate experience. I've seen this stuff done multiple times over and over again. This isn't my first time to the rodeo, me personally. I've always, kind of had this whole thing where, like, me personally, I made a video about it last year. My first and last scare ever in a survival horror game was over 25 years ago. That was the first Dino Crisis game. I showed the sequence where the T-Rex busting through the wall, the window. Why did it scare me? It wasn't because it was the most scariest scene ever. It was just the fact I'd never experienced that before. That was the first time I'd ever played a survival horror game before, and I wasn't used to the tricks of the trade. But fear is and horror is kind of like a magic trick. Once you see how it's done, you kind of know, the steps to it, and it kind of defeats the whole effectiveness of it. It's kind of a one-trick pony in a way. Not saying that you can't still do fear, but it's not as effective. The horror is not as effective once you've seen how the tropes and the whole tricks of the trade work. So by your own token, Capcom, how could I ever be scared by that, no matter what the character's doing on the screen? Because I have the ultimate experience. Whether the character is experienced or not, it's not going to change me based on your own letter of how experience and unexperienced works with fear. So, yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that's BS. I mean, are you going to tell me, right, that think of the most terrifying horror game you ever play? I don't know. Everyone's different. It's subjective. I get it. But let's say Alien Isolation. A lot of people will say that's a very terrifying game. It's a game I deeply love. All right. And this replaced Amanda Ripley with Leon, but have the same rules apply. It's just that it's different characters. But, Leon's got experience. Does that make the game all of a sudden not terrifying? No, because you're still going to die the same way, and that thing jumps down on you and can kill you in one hit. There's nothing you can really do, and you don't have necessarily all the equipment to fight back now as you get later in the game with a flamethrower or you ward it off with noisemakers to distract it. Still, the same rules apply. It grabs you, you're dead. It runs up on you fast as hell. It doesn't matter. You're Leon. You're still going to die the same way. Does that mean the game is not terrifying? No, it's just stupid. Once again, look, everybody's different, okay? I acknowledge it. I get it. Everyone looks at horror and fear differently. Everyone has different things that get them scared or terrified. That's why I always disqualify myself, because I don't get terrified and fearful of playing survival horror video games or movies for that matter. I just watch them, and whatever happens, happens. I play them, I enjoy them, but, none of that stuff phases me. I don't care, so I'm disqualified from that. But let's take an iconic scene from the same franchise. Let's go back to Resident Evil 1. What's one of the most iconic horror, terrifying moments, period? Is the dogs busting through the window. It's an iconic moment. I think everyone can agree with that. Another moment could be is the first time you see the zombie turn around. Let's just take those two moments, for example. Does those moments happening make it any more or less terrifying, whether Jill or Chris, whoever you're playing, is experiencing this stuff for the first time, or if they've been doing it for the last 15, 20 years? No, because I could damn well tell you the dog going through the window would have had just about anyone jumping at least the first time without knowing it was going to happen, regardless of what the experience of the people on the screen was. And then the zombie turn around, it's a cinematic scene, but it didn't really matter because, once again, the whole experience is you, the player, experiencing it for the first time. It doesn't matter what the person on the screen was doing. I'm sorry, I'm not that person that agrees with the whole how the player's reacting, if their experience level, or if they've ever done this before, matters so much compared to what you, the player, ultimately experience. Because your experience is always going to be completely different. But here's another thing, since, Leon is bad at horror. All right? Let's say he's guaranteed he's in Resident Evil Requiem, right? You're going to tell me that if he sees a police officer that happens to be a zombie in Requiem while returning to Raccoon City, that isn't going to have him have a flashback or think back to the times when he was in Raccoon City for the first time? You don't think that will have some type of psychological effect on him? Because I sure as hell think it would. Hell, here's another reason. Maybe he's trying to save somebody and he fails to save him, and it makes him think of the moments in Raccoon City where he failed to save other people. I mean, these are just things I'm coming off the top of my head, not even thinking about it, I could figure out. But, he's bad for horror and fear because he's just fearless and he's invincible, which he's clearly not. But once again, this is a Capcom problem. This is a problem Capcom wanting to do everything face value and not really delving deep in their characters. They can do a lot of things psychologically really deep and emotionally scarring towards Leon. It doesn't take away from him, because I've heard people say, they're going to make him look like he's just less of a character because he's not like always 100% Arnold Schwarzenegger action hero type. But no, it makes him even more cooler of a character if you ask me. But it's like they don't want to do that. They just want to say comments, he's too badass so he can't get scared of anything. No, trust me, everyone gets scared of something, whether they show it visibly or not. Hopefully I made those points clear, and hopefully maybe one day Capcom can realize this. The OG characters, just because they've been through a lot, doesn't mean that you can't put them in situations that have horror-induced elements in it. But, as I always like to say, that is my opinion. I want to hear your all opinion. Do you think Leon is bad for horror, or do you think it's just simply Capcom just not being creative enough to put him in very simple situations, I think, that can induce horror elements? Let me know down below in the comment section. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back in the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.